So welcome back to episode number 3. This is team number 30 on my rankings, and obviously it is the Calgary Flames. And I know this is going to be slightly controversial. I think the first two are pretty straightforward as the two worst teams in the NHL. But a lot of people like Calgary, at least more than the third worst team in the NHL. And in fairness, the next couple teams are fairly closely ranked together. So it's not like there's like a big gap. Like there was a pretty decent gap between San Jose and the rest of the NHL. And there's a decent gap between, like a smaller but still significant gap between Columbus and this next kind of cluster of teams. The Flames just so happen to rank where they did. We'll kind of get into one of the big reasons for that at the end of this. But first of all, let's jump into the coaching side of this team. And Ryan Huska, who I have as a D, I think it was pretty impressive that he went 38 and 39 with this team last season. They don't really have a ton of talent around them, but going 500 virtually with this roster the way it was solid. I think a lot of that had to do with Jacob Markstrom. But yeah, I mean, like, I can't really fault him too much for that. But it's only 1 year of coaching experience at the NHL level as a head coach, so it wasn't a whole lot to judge him on. So they get the boost of him being a D instead of an F. But that's about as far as I could go with that. Moving on to their off-season moves. This was kind of an interesting one here. First of all, the forwards, I think, are slightly downgraded. They bring in Anthony Mantha and Ryan Lomberg. They lose AJ Greer and Andrew Mangiapane. I think Lomberg is a slight upgrade over Greer, although they're both like D-, like replacement level players for me. I just think there's a big enough gap between Mangiapane and Mantha where this becomes a slight downgrade. Mantha should just slot into that second line role that Mangiapane was in anyway, but I just think Mangiapane was like he's just a better player. So they get a slight downgrade. It's not like anything significant, but it's there. Defensively, excuse me, I give them a slight upgrade. Also, I'm showing off the new blue sliders. I was asked to change it from green. So there you go. So blue is good now, just as evolving hockey taught us all. And defensively, they bring in Kevin Ball and Jake Bean. They lose Oliver Shillington, who's still a free agent, Jordan Osterley, and Dennis Gilbert. I really fell out of favor with Oliver Shillington. He hasn't really come back to where he was like at the start of the season. I think it was 2 years ago, where he was just electric. He's really kind of fell off from there. I think Jake Bean's probably an upgrade over that. And then I take Kevin Ball over Jordan Osterley. So they get the slight upgrade for that, but I'm willing to lean towards like no real change. But I just want to show off the blue. I like the blue. So they get the slight upgrade. And then goalies, obviously, is a massive downgrade. Jacob Markstrom was one of the best goalies in the NHL last season. They lose him for nothing, or at least not for nothing, but they lose him and replace him with nothing. And that's where this team sits. So overall, I think they got worse, but at least forwards, it wasn't much of a change. Defensively, it wasn't much of a change. It's just mainly the loss of Markstrom that really hurts this team overall. So the forwards are definitely the strongest unit on this team. I have them ranked 24th in the NHL. And before I kind of dive into this team, I want to talk about Nazem Kadri, because I might get some pushback on why Nazem Kadri is an A-, which is my third tier of player in this. And if you ignore, right, like for a lot of these guys, I broke down the last 3 years of their careers if they were available. And obviously 3 years ago, Nazem Kadri had the crazy like 110 or whatever point season it was in Colorado. So I didn't really want to factor that in too much, because like obviously that's an outlier. Like we all understand that he was not a 110, 112, whatever it was player. Over the last 2 seasons, just in Calgary, Nazem Kadri is 64th among forwards in points, and he's 43rd in goals above replacement. He's also a top leader in controlled zone entries and entries leading to chances. Right? He's also high-end at exiting the zone of possession. These are all things that he's in the top like echelon of forwards in. When making these tiers, like when you got to the bottom of the third tier, you were kind of looking at like the 40th to 50th best forward in the NHL. Like that's kind of where that tier ended. And, in 200 and whatever forwards, the top 40 or so was considered in that first line tier. And 64th in points and 43rd in GAR, that's kind of right in the middle there is 50th, right? So I think obviously Kadri is not, people criticize him for the Colorado season because he was playing with great players. It's well, you can't then also criticize him for not putting up as many points playing with this offense, which is significantly worse than that Colorado offense was. That's kind of where I find the A- happy medium in there. I think he's too good to be in the B+ tier. You've seen a couple of the B+ forwards that I've had so far. Kadri's better than them. Significant enough that he should be in this tier. Now, do I think he's a top end of the A- tier? No, but he's still good enough to be considered a strong first liner and in that group. So that's my Nazem Kadri rant. I think he's one of the most underrated forwards in the NHL, and I'm excited to see if he can continue that. Obviously, this isn't a prediction for what he's going to do this year. This is just based on what he has done. That's what these rankings are for everybody, and that's need to specify that because we're going to get into that later. But as of right now, I don't see any reason why you can't have Nazem Kadri as an A- player in the NHL. Moving on to Jonathan Huberdeau, who's the next guy that I've kind of highlighted here. I have him as a B. I think very similar to Johnny Gaudreau, which is kind of ironic because he basically replaced Gaudreau in this system. I think he just needs to have that bounce back season. He needs to figure it out, kind of get comfortable. And I thought it might happen last season. By the end of last season, it didn't really work. I mean, this is going into his third year here now. He has to maybe not prove that he earns the entire contract, but at least account for some of that value, kind of similar to what Jeff Skinner did 2 years ago, where maybe he wasn't worth every penny that they paid him, but he was worth 75-80% of it. I don't even know if Huberdeau's there yet, so it's kind of a make or break season for Jonathan Huberdeau. We'll see what happens with that. Obviously, his team's rebuilding, so there isn't a ton of pressure on him to be elite, but you still want to see some bright spots for somebody that you're paying as much as you are for him, and obviously one of the guys you moved for Matthew Tkachuk. And finally, bringing Anthony Mantha, who's kind of a project player at this point. I don't know what the feelings are on Anthony Mantha. As far as B- players go, I think he's one of the more project players in that tier for me. I think it'll be fine. He doesn't fill the Mangiapane shoes maybe as much as they probably would want him to, but he can still be in a battle with guys like Kuzmenko and Zary for spots in that. Coronado can battle for a spot in that top six. I think him and Kuzmenko can kind of flip back and forth. Andrei Kuzmenko, by the way, we'll talk about him for a second. Obviously, the season 2 years ago in Vancouver looks like it was an outlier now. But as soon as he came to Calgary, he kind of found that scoring touch again. He found a bit more consistency, and that was encouraging because I like Kuzmenko. That's why he's in that B- tier. I can't just completely ignore his season 2 years ago, but I definitely think a lot of that had to do with Elias Pettersson, which clearly they moved him off Pettersson's line, and he was no longer a 40-goal scorer. But yeah, I mean, he seemed to start finding some consistency in Calgary after the trade deadline, or after the trade. So we'll see. He's a project player. I actually like him playing on that third line with Sharangovich and Coronado. I think that seems to be a good schematic fit for him, and all those guys kind of are going to develop together and move up this system together. So I like that. Obviously, they still have Mikhail Backlund, who they just re-signed. I was kind of surprised that he got the extension. I guess re-signed him last year. And Connor Zary is somebody I think could take a big step. So there's pieces here to like. Obviously, you have Zary, of Coronado. There's other players that they have coming up that could also fit into this bottom six as we go towards that. So really their fourth line is just bodies. It was the most I could give them for points. These are the D- players that they have. So that's why I threw these guys in here. But there's definitely a couple other players that could fit into that fourth line as they get out of the Wranglers system and kind of move up into the NHL. But overall, I think it's a solid unit. It's definitely their best unit. And I think it might be kind of an underrated offense, honestly, depending on who you ask. But I love Nazem Kadri. I really like Connor Zary. I like Coronado. I think he takes a big step. Obviously, we just haven't seen enough of him yet, so he's a D-, but that's a rating that's going to jump up pretty quickly. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of if Blake Coleman can recreate the season he had last year, because it was really good, and if he can like truly become that real top six forward, and if Jonathan Huberdeau can bounce back. So there's some storylines to watch on this team that are going to be fun. I think they're going to be an entertaining team. I don't know how good they're going to be. Obviously, I have them ranked third last in the NHL, but I think they're going to be fun. This is an interesting team. So that's Calgary's offense. Moving on to the blue line, which I'm a lot less high on. I have them 29th in the NHL. And I think the conversation has to begin with Mackenzie Weegar. First of all, I think Mackenzie Weegar and Rasmus Andersson are two of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. But Weegar, to me, stands out as somebody who really gets talked down to because people see the turnovers and not that he's putting up, like, they don't see like the 70 points that guys like Fox and McCarr are putting up, and they freak out. Over the last 2 seasons, Mackenzie Weegar has 30 more turnovers than Adam Fox. Right? Like, Weegar's elite at pretty much every aspect of hockey, but he has 30 more turnovers than Adam Fox, so people freak out. Which is why Mackenzie Weegar isn't in my A+ tier, by the way. But Mackenzie Weegar, I think the best analogy that I can come up with for Weegar and the turnovers, because turnovers are really the only argument people have against them. And again, it's 30 less than Adam Fox. That's 15 a season. That's not making or breaking a player's career. And he's a heavy puck possession defenseman. He's going to turn the puck over, especially on a team like this. And even when he was in Florida, they weren't like the team they are now. But Mackenzie Weegar's turnovers are like, the analogy that I like is the World War II plane. And in World War II, when planes would come back to base, engineers would add armor to the places that did not have bullet holes. Like, the planes would come back covered in bullet holes because they were in war. And the reason why they put armor in the places that didn't have bullet holes is because they knew that even though the plane was shot at and had bullet holes in it, it could still get home and it could still fly. So why are you protecting this area that you know is fine, basically, even if it gets damaged? And that's Mackenzie Weegar of turnovers. Like, he turns the puck over a bunch, but his defensive numbers are still really good. He's not allowing a bunch of high danger chances against. He's still able to generate offense at a high elite level. It's like, okay, he turns the puck over. It's like, it's fine. Obviously, you'd like that to get cleaned up. And maybe that's the difference between him being an A and an A+ defenseman. But there really isn't like this huge worry for me, at least for him at this point. Obviously, he still has many years left on his contract. I'm not saying anything about that. But as of now, I mean, Mackenzie Weegar rocks. And I have no issue with him being in that second tier of defenseman. Rasmus Andersson is kind of a similar player in terms of, like, maybe people think I'm overrating him a little bit. And I think it's just kind of the same thing. People just don't understand Rasmus Andersson's game. And he's a really fun, like, two-way defenseman as well. So, other than that, though, this blue line, I don't hate it. I mean, you have Miromanov, who is going to develop and is going to continue to grow, and he's D- right now. But I'm assuming he'll get better than that by the end of the season, hopefully. Joel Hanley's just kind of a guy. That's nothing special. Kevin Ball's a good, like, third pair defenseman, somebody you can kind of just throw out and can eat minutes, which Calgary needs, and I respected them getting him in that Markstrom trade, although I think they probably could have done better, but none of the goalie trades were really good for the teams trading away elite goalies, so that's fair enough, I guess. And I like the Jake Bean bet. I think Jake Bean's a fun defenseman who kind of fits the mold of what this team's trying to develop on the blue line, and he can be there for a couple of years and try to develop with these guys and move up the lineup as he as he continues to grow. So he fits this defense well enough. It's 29th. I think it could slightly improve by the end of the season with guys like, I don't know how much Jake Bean's going to improve from a C, but he could probably maybe move up to a C minus. Miramanov obviously could jump up as well. So there's a couple pieces here. There's nothing like franchise changing on this blue line, at least in development terms. But again, I think they're all kind of fun defensemen, and I love Mackenzie Weegar and Rasmus Andersson. So those are bright spots to kind of look forward to. Finally, we move into what I have ranked as the quote-unquote worst goalie tandem in the NHL. And again, like I said in the Columbus video, I actually think Columbus's goaltending tandem is worse, but because I don't see the upside in either of Columbus's goalies that I do in Dustin Wolf. And Dustin Wolf's been given kind of the keys to the kingdom here, and he wasn't really given those a ton last season. Obviously, with Vladar and Markstrom there, it's hard to give him that. But even though I see potential in Dustin Wolf to be far better than a D- goalie by the end of the season, I do have to acknowledge the fact that he is a D- goalie as of right now. There are 72 goalies who fit the criteria, at least for last season, as D- goaltenders, as guys who played 10 games, basically, that could fit into this category. Dustin Wolf is 59th in save percentage, 65th in FSV, 66th in goals saved above expected, and he's only 70th in expected goals against, meaning that has all these stats that he's like in the bottom tier of, and he had the third easiest workload of any of those goalies. That's not good. Like, that's not an NHL level goalie. I'm sorry, it's not. And I think that he can easily jump up from that this season with more experience. But there's nothing really for me to go on besides that. So I had to rate him a D-. I didn't have a choice. So that's why he's here. And that's why they're the 32nd goalie tandem, because he gets that D- grade. Do I think he improves from that? Absolutely. But again, I have to grade these guys based on what they have done, not what they're going to do, not what I think they're going to do, because that would be unfair. So for now, he's a D- goalie. For now, this is the 32nd goalie tandem in the league. I do think that it gets significantly better by the end of the season, but my hands were tied. The stats are what they are. I couldn't really do much about that. As for Dan Vladar, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that he's better than a D-. I would have liked to see this team bring in another goalie to kind of be like a proper like safety net backup for Dustin Wolf. They didn't. That's fine, I guess, but there was a bunch of them out there, right? Like, this is another team that I think like a James Reimer could have fit in. Like, I'm going to throw James Reimer at everybody who has a young goalie and not a great backup. They didn't do that, but yeah, overall, like this goalie tandem is definitely not what it should be, and what it probably will be by the end of the year. So anyway, that's all I got for you. This is number 30, so 29 should be out in a couple days, and this 2 to 3 day between upload thing seems to be working. It's giving me time to make sure that I get through everybody before the start of the season, and as long as I stay consistent with it, I should be able to get through everybody well before the start of the season. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and we've seen a big spike. My San Jose video just went crazy like yesterday, so thank you for that. Welcome to everybody who's new. I also have an Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram, it's also MBI Hockey. You can follow me there. I post stuff on there too. So if you want to kind of get more updates and stuff about me and my posting and stuff, that's the place to get all that from. But thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think of the Calgary Flames, and we'll see you guys in the next video.